One flash of a camera changed everything. A formula that grew, evolved, developed, saw massive success and failures. One in which the theme parks no longer care about the ticket that they're selling to get in, but instead are more focused on the ways in which they can maximize it with optimal experiences and add-on offerings. But to get here, we need to go back, all the way back, over into the late 1800s, in which the early parks and fairs like Coney Island became novel hubs for different areas of photography culture, in which guests would want to capture the overall excitement and emotions that they were going through. As while there was no on-ride photography, there was several photographers who would walk around the area and take those souvenir photos. After seeing those initial dollar signs and the price that guests were willing to pay to capture the emotions that they were feeling around the fair in an area and time in which guests did not have smartphones just readily available in their pockets and cameras themselves were still relatively new, there was such a high demand and value for it, in which the early parks like Coney Island, although the exact destination of the first on-ride photography is still unknown and unclear, decided to embark upon the idea of capturing the moment when guests were actually riding those rides instead of just walking around the area around them. And to do this, they saw an initial early adoption and tests. However, due to the technology at the time, these rides were still extremely mechanically intense, unreliable, expensive, and difficult to synchronize. However, there were some benefits in certain types of rides in which they were great for, like flume rides, which were one of the more first adoptions when it came to on-ride photography. This was because there are certain areas of the ride, like the splashdown, which can create those dramatic reactions inside the guests, and guests would specifically most likely be facing forward to really capture their exact faces. In addition to this, unlike some other rides like a roller coaster, which can be rather unpredictable and unsteady at times, a log flume was much more predictable and synchronized with different timing of the individual areas of the attraction. It was a perfect candidate when it came to on-ride photos. Although this overall technology didn't really take off when more modern on-ride photos became more developed and available. This success would then eventually be slowly rolled out to some of the other more high-thrilling attractions at the park, like those roller coasters in the late 1970s to the 1980s. Due to advancements in technology like the infrared sensors, theme parks were more likely to adopt and bring this technology to some of their other rides in the park. And to further help sell this idea and build upon the success, other companies started to take note and implement them into their parks, like Six Flags and Disneyland. Unfortunately though, even with this mass adoption and continual advancements in the technology, photos themselves also took a harder time to be developed at the time, as well as many photos being discarded, and the overall operations was extremely labor intensive, especially when you consider at the time there was no digital photography. However, that would soon change relatively fast in the 1990s to the early 2000s, in which guests were now able to instantly display and purchase those photos of their ride experience. In addition to this drastically increased the higher throughput of the operation, as well as providing a more automated and more lucrative experience for the park operator. And as a cherry on top to all this technology didn't slow down, but rather continued to grow, evolve, and implement at a rapid pace with several new adoptions like apps and the overall technology. After seeing this initial success of how guests were willing to pay more to further improve their overall theme park experience, theme park operators were looking for more ways to help maximize on this newfound knowledge. And one of the more widely adopted ones that began to take over in the late 1990s to 2000s was an add-on option for a fast pass-like system in which guests were willing to pay more for the ability to skip the line or offer a shorter line to go and ride that experience. And this is a format that grew and developed for a variety of different companies in different ways over the years, with some of the more notable ones being Fast Pass and was initially free, but still allowed Disney the ability to have more money overall by incorporating it, as not only was this a hidden premium experience in their parks, in which Disney would eventually take the system away and replace it with a paid offering, but in the interim also allowed Disney more time for those guests to go shop and experience the parks and other areas in which they could spend more money indirectly instead of just having the rides be the main profit driver. Another big player in this space place was Universal Theme Parks with their express line option, having guests the ability to pay extra money to skip that line and provide that short experience, but also giving guests the ability, if they stayed at some of their higher end hotels, to have that express system included with their park admission. In addition to this, Universal also offers a cheaper experience in which guests can still enter and skip those lines, but only do so once for each attraction inside the parks. And later on, debuting recently, opportunity for guests to pay a one-time use for just one ride inside their parks to enter the express line. But regardless of the format, one thing that stayed consistent was this tier structure of the pricing, in which guests had the ability to pick and choose a different level as well as what they're willing to spend to provide that overall experience for those parks and continue to build upon the initial theme park ticket that they paid to get into those parks. Following the success of these initial add-on experiences and the overall pricing structures implemented into the parks, the theme parks decided to take it one step farther by offering now several different types of general admission tickets into the parks, as outside of the base general admission ticket, guests would also have the opportunity to pay extra for other features, whether it be a park hopper ticket allowing guests to go and experience some of the other parks or offerings at the resort with just one ticket in the same day, VIP tickets, which provide guests a ultra-luxurious experience inside the parks, in which those guests were willing to spend more money in exchange for saving that extra time and having an overall enhanced and luxurious experience of the parks. In addition to this, theme parks were now also starting to sell those tour tickets for the park experience, as why to sell a ticket once for a certain type of ride when you can provide a more enhanced experience for the overall resort in different areas of the rides. For instance, guests already paid either to enter a fast or standby line for Living with the Land, and while this attraction itself is wonderful in its own right, Disney also had the opportunity to charge extra for those behind-the-scenes tours in which you're able to go on a more specific walking path around the individual attraction, as well as learn more in-depth details about the overall experience. Outside of just offering those day tickets for the parks, theme parks also began to cater more to those local audiences as well, to help balance out the overall downtime in times when there would be more tourists coming to those individual areas, while also continuing to maximize the price that some of those local guests were willing to pay and the amount and desire that they want to come and visit those parks and attractions for. Now, several parks offering annual or seasonal passes in which guests can buy one pass and visit for several periods of different days, as well as sometimes even up to a year or more to go and enter those individual attractions and areas of the park. Furthermore, there's also other different types of memberships, like access within those parks to provide more of that luxurious experience, with one of the most noticeable ones being Club 33, in which Disney would charge because extra money to go and stay and experience a more luxurious, closed-off area of the park to those general park admission guests, while also having the ability to wine and dine some of those corporate customers and guests that would come into their parks. And speaking of those corporate guests, those would be another opportunity for parks to further maximize on their revenue, unlocking certain areas in which they could completely buy off certain areas of the parks. Speaking of those corporate guests, it's another great reminder to theme parks of just how a theme park is not just for those regular families, but also provide interest for several companies around the world as they continue to have the opportunity and also insights of wanting to go and rent out certain areas of the park or different areas as a whole. And due to this demand, began to offer more corporate buyouts inside of their parks, whether it be for individual attractions or the whole park as a whole, in which they were able to further maximize on the revenue coming into that park, as well as double dip when it came to the theme park admissions, as they could sell the park once for those general admission guests during the day and close the park earlier, or Friday after hours experience, in which they could sell the park again for those corporate buyout guests, as well as give guests another opportunity in the form of those add-on experiences after the park closes with special events, whether it be after-hour offerings or more exclusive and design areas and festivals like Halloween Horror Nights, in which guests would be able to pay more for a unique Halloween-like vibe in the park and experience more unique attractions like haunted houses and scare zones. In fact, this concept became so popular over the years that Universal has even spun it off into its own separate standalone experience of Horror Unleashed, a smaller, more intimate experience built upon the fans of Halloween Horror Nights, initially designed and built for Las Vegas as part of a more entertainment-focused district of the overall area, and is now being built in a second location over in Chicago. And as a cherry on top to all this, these theme parks were able to further capitalize on these seasonal add-on experience and offerings at their parks like Halloween Horror Nights by implementing those previous very same strategies like the express lines, VIP experiences, and more. However, while these individual experiences and attractions are a great way to further maximize the profitability of those existing riding infrastructure areas of the park, it was also leaving out a good chunk of revenue in an untapped market that was left rather undiscovered until Universal decided to go all in, with this being fandoms and having fans of the park that truly want to live and immerse themselves in the overall experience and themed lands, with one of the first major hits being the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, in which I have a whole video series on it if you want to see more in-depth detail to it. But in simple terms, this was a great way for Universal to not only provide a super immersive land in which was a massive hit and a way to stand out for the theme park and make it its own destination, but the land themselves were also designed in a way in which fans could go and buy those individual experiences that they saw in those movies and read about in the books, whether it be shopping for unique and specific merchandise designed and tailored specifically for the brand, purchasing themed experiences like getting fitted for a robe, purchasing an interactive wand in which they can go and play around and experience what it's like to be a wizard inside of the parks, charging an exorbitant amount of fees, a strategy that continues to be implemented today with now a second generation of the wand, in which Universal could continue to cash out more revenue, as well as just an overall improved theming, which is this food and beverages found throughout the land, with some major hits like Butterbeer, which took years for development but continues to sell millions each year. And to make this even more magical for both the park guests and operators, this was not just like, oh, they sold millions across all of their resorts around the world, in which this greatly successful format was rolled out too. But now we're selling millions at a single resort. In fact, since 2010, Universal has sold over 20 million cups of butterbeer to guests at their parks, a format that continues to be even more profitable as the price continues to skyrocket due to the great demand, which can see several minute-long waits for guests to want to pay for this currently $9.49 cup of liquid. And this Golden Goose wasn't just a one-off event either, but Universal continues to develop, grow, and improve upon the overall experience and develop it for other areas of the park in a format that can be simply rolled out and improved to other areas of the park, like Super Nintendo World. Guests were also able to buy a power-up band in which they can go to experience a more unique and interactive offerings for the park that are built exclusively for guests of those bands, while also improving certain areas of existing rides, like able to track scores and improve the overall interactivity of those individual rides. Plus, if you choose not to purchase those additional add-on experiences, you are still left with a greatly improved theme park experience, as you still get those classic attractions that you bought the general admission park ticket to, while now enjoying a more kinetic energy-filled environment for the overall land. But with every great success story and rollout like this, which began to be adopted into several parks around the world, there was also some failures along the ways, and due to the misguided judgment of them, as well as potentially other problems as well, with one of the most noticeable ones being the Galactic Star Cruiser, a story which was both a massive success over at Disney World, but also technically a failure, as it closed after just over 19 months of operation, which is eventually written off for tax purposes and now being converted into Imagineering offices. However, the overall experience that it did offer in the format of a multi-night experience in which guests can truly live within the Star Wars universe and interact with individual characters and experiences that build up to a climactic finale was greatly successful, with many guests that did go and experience the attraction giving it great reviews. However, there was also that critical flaw when it came to the experience design. As well, it did provide that great experience, it was designed so in a way in which it needed to have a high price to operate, and due to this, Disney needed to charge a high amount, $6,000 per room to be exact, for just a baseline room, in which it was super high, but needed so in a way to help keep the experience profitable and operating. In addition to this, there's also the flaw of just how and who it was designed for. As well, there are fans that do want to go and experience this attraction. It was extremely niche, as it was fans that wanted to go live a multi-night role-playing adventure. Fans that had to be Star Wars fans, as well big, they need to be Star Wars fans of that new trilogy, which is often frowned upon and less well received than this beautiful original trilogy of movies. In addition to this, those fans also need to have the money and to be enough of them to go and support this experience for it to exist year round. And unfortunately, at the end, Disney decided that it was better off to just cut their losses, write it off for tax purposes, and convert it into Imagineering offices. However, that isn't to say that this experience was a complete failure, as it was a great experience for those that did go and board the experience. In addition to this, Universal took note of those dedicated fans and wanted to provide a new experience based upon it, but done so in a way in which it can offer an experience at a much cheaper price tag, as well as appeal to a much more broader audience, and also provide more fans as well in the form of Fans Fest, a spin-off of the popular Halloween Horror Nights venue. But instead of entering into haunted houses and scare zones, guests will now be able to immerse themselves into those interactive walkthrough experiences in overall areas in which they can even linger and spend as much time as they want to, immerse themselves into several different and iconic areas of the film franchises that they know and love. In addition to this, you can go and experience some of those existing attractions that the park offers during the day, but done so in a lesser weight format, while providing even more enhanced value for those tickets, in which this experience was a massive hit, unlike the Galactic Star Cruiser, seeing a second year and soon a third year down the road of this popular experience, and would not be surprised if FanFest does eventually get rolled out to those other resorts around the world to further capitalize on this popular addition to the park's lineup, but also decrease the overall cost to provide this experience for the parks due to the economics of scale of having it designed and adapted and rolled out to several different experiences instead of just having it built for one. While all these opportunities are a great way for the theme park operator to earn more money as well as give guests the opportunity to further enhance their visit, it does leave some of those baseline guests a little disappointed and angry, as some of the areas that they once knew and loved are now behind a certain paywall, while also done so in a way in which they are not a priority anymore. Instead, that priority is now given to those higher paying guests. And while it does kind of suck for them, at the end of the day, I view it as this. You're getting a cheaper experience due in part to those guests that are willing to pay more, and you are able to go and experience those offerings at a lower price tag due in part to this. In addition to this, you still have the opportunity to pay more if you want to, and even if you choose not to, a lot of the times you'll still find an overall experience improved, as those different attractions were now built around those higher paying guests and getting more revenue for those parks to invest more money into those attractions. And at the end of the day, it's a win-win for every guest that goes into those gates, whether paying that baseline ticket or a corporate party buying out the whole park for the night.